There's a word for people who always offer to help and never ask for anything back. We call them capable, reliable, the person you can count on. We almost never ask what it costs them. By the end of this, you're going to understand why the people who seem most self-sufficient are often carrying the most, and why that arrangement has almost nothing to do with strength. What do you actually say when someone offers help? Most people with this pattern give you some version of the same answer. I've got it. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. And they mean it, even when it isn't true. This isn't about people who don't need help. It's about people who don't ask even when they clearly do. And the gap between needing something and being willing to say so can run for years without anyone noticing, including the person living in it. The easy explanation is pride. And pride is part of it. But it isn't the engine. Here's what's actually going on. For most people, asking for help is a practical calculation. Do I need this? Can they help? Is it reasonable to ask? For some people, it's something else entirely. A signal about competence, about value, about who you are in the relationship. The moment you ask, something gets decided about you. And it's that, not the inconvenience, not the logistics, that makes the words hard to say. The deadline they've been managing alone. The difficult situation nobody knows about. The thing they should have asked for help with 2 weeks ago. Fine. I've got it. I'm handling it. They can ask for directions. They can ask a colleague where the file is. They struggle with anything that would mean someone saw them struggling. Picture this. Someone is running behind on something. A project, a situation at home, something they've been managing quietly. A colleague notices and offers to help. And without thinking, the person says, "No, I've got it, but thank you." The colleague nods and moves on. The person goes back to managing. Not because accepting would have been a burden. Not because the offer wasn't genuine. But because something in them registered the offer as a test they needed to pass. Accepting would have meant admitting the weight was real. And that felt worse than the weight itself. The help isn't the problem. Needing it is. Here's where it gets interesting. Because if you ask people with this pattern why they don't ask, most give you the same answer. They don't want to be a burden. They don't want to impose. They don't want to make someone else's day harder. Which sounds considerate, and they mean it. But the research tells a different story. Studies on help-seeking found that people consistently underestimate how willing others are to help. When researchers had people ask strangers for small favors, askers predicted far more refusals than they actually got. On average, they underestimated compliance by nearly half. People said yes about twice as often as askers expected. So the fear of burdening people doesn't match reality. The math is wrong. But here's why that finding doesn't fix anything. Telling someone people want to help more than you think doesn't change the behavior. Because the behavior isn't coming from a prediction about other people. It's coming from what needing says about them. Attachment researchers have a name for this. Compulsive self-reliance. Not the practical kind, not "I can do this myself," but the kind where needing help conflicts with how you understand yourself. Self-sufficient isn't just something you are, it's something you have to keep being. And it usually traces back somewhere specific. A family where struggle wasn't talked about. An early role, oldest child, most capable kid, that came with unspoken expectations. A household where the adults had a lot going on and the kids learned to handle things. Nobody says, "Don't need anything," but the message gets through anyway. But here's where it gets stranger. Because everything we've covered so far is about how these people relate to asking. The stranger part is how they relate to giving. People who struggle to ask for help are often the most generous helpers. They notice when someone is struggling before that person says a word. They show up. They carry other people's weight without being asked. That looks like a contradiction. It isn't. It's the same arrangement running in both directions. Giving is safe. You're the capable one. Receiving flips the dynamic. Now you're the one who needed something. And that role doesn't fit. Here's what trips most people up. The gentle push that produces more resistance. The partner who says, "Just let me help you," and gets a wall. The colleague who stops offering because the answer is always the same. The friend who'd help instantly if asked, never asked. The logic doesn't land because the response isn't coming from logic. They think they're protecting the relationship from the cost of their needs. They have no idea they're doing the opposite. And then there's this. Research on what's called invisible support, help given in ways the recipient doesn't consciously notice, found something striking. When someone quietly handles a problem before you even know about it, your stress goes down. When someone offers help directly, something else happens first. A small spike of something that looks like shame, a self-protective recoil. The support is welcome. The acknowledgement that you needed it isn't. That gap between what they want and what they can accept doesn't stay contained. It spreads into a quiet exhaustion they can't quite account for, and a loneliness that coexists with being well-liked. But knowing what runs this pattern and recognizing where it actually shows up in your life, those are different things. And that gap is where most people stall. It looks like competence. They're the person who never complains, who always seems to be managing. Colleagues trust them with the hard things. Friends lean on them. The reputation for being reliable is accurate. They are reliable. What's less visible is what happens when something goes wrong that they can't fix alone. They try longer than makes sense. They work around the problem rather than ask for the direct solution. At home, it creates a specific kind of distance. They're warm, present, generous. But there's a layer you can't quite reach. They'll tell you what's happening. They won't tell you how much it's costing them. The people close to them often sense this without naming it. Things flow outward easily. Coming in is harder. Over time, the cost accumulates. Not from any one heavy thing, but from the weight of everything they handled alone when they didn't have to. Here's what nobody tells you about self-reliance when it works this way. It doesn't feel like a habit. It feels like a value. It feels like who you are. That's what makes it so durable. You can't talk yourself out of something that feels like a personality trait. You can only start to notice where it's serving you and where it's quietly costing you something. Not asking for help isn't the same as not needing it. It's a very specific arrangement. You can be fully present for people, but people can't quite be there for you in the same way. Not because they wouldn't, because something keeps redirecting the offer. The people who've built the most self-sufficient lives are sometimes the ones who've let the least in. Not out of coldness. They're often the warmest, most giving people around. Out of a very old, very quiet decision that needing something was a risk not worth taking. If that lands somewhere familiar, here's what actually matters. The capacity that makes you reliable, the thing that makes you the person others come to, comes from the same place as the thing that's been costing you. They're not separate. But you can start to notice it. And noticing is not nothing. There's a body of research on help-seeking, compulsive self-reliance, and invisible support worth exploring if this resonated.